All of us who are Christians are interested in what is happening in the Middle East. It's rather striking that in the Bible, Israel assumes such a large place in the redemptive program because no one looking at world history would have suggested it. It's a rather interesting thing to me also that if you read the histories of philosophies, and particularly if you read philosophies of history, you'll discover that many of our finest philosophical thinkers have sought to give some kind of rhyme or reason to the progress of history. And it's striking to me that in almost all of the philosophies of history that have been written, this discipline, by the way, is a relatively recent discipline, but in almost all of the philosophies of history that have been written, no place is given to the nation Israel at all. The world is completely blind to the place of Israel in the divine program. The world is completely blind to the place of Israel in the history of the world. It's a striking thing, but it's true. Go back as far as you like and read the philosophers of history, even Augustine's philosophy of history. Perhaps the first, the City of God, is deficient in this respect, for he did not understand the nature of the place of Israel in the history of man. But modern philosophers of history, it is pitiful. Some of them say that Israel puzzles them, but they have no way to account for Israel and the history of the world. At the center of the biblical revelation is Israel and the question of Jesus Christ. His saving cross and the place of Israel form two of the greatest themes of the Bible. And Romans very beautifully shows us that. As you read through the epistle of the Romans, the first 8 chapters given by the apostle to the Gentiles describe for us the plan of salvation by which an elect company has emerged as the people of God. When you reach the 8th chapter of the epistle to the Romans and its climactic statements concerning the greatness of this program, we have the statement made, "Who shall lay anything to the charge of God's elect?" An elect company of people have come into existence through the preaching of the gospel. But the striking thing that a Jewish man listening to Paul would have noticed is this: Israel is missing from among the company of God's elect. Now that would raise an immediate problem, because he knew enough about divine revelation to know that divine revelation had at its center the nation Israel. So he is faced with a dilemma. The Apostle Paul has stated that here is an elect company of the people of God who are the object of the purpose of God, and Israel is missing. Now, Paul's gospel, if that is true, must be false, because any kind of message of God that leaves Israel out can hardly be the true message of God. I think that Paul knew quite well, far more than I do, I'm sure, that this 9, 10, and 11 of the Epistle of the Romans was a necessary thing in the light of what he had done. So Romans 9, 10, and 11 is written in order to make some points. What he wants to do now is to explain why Israel is not among the elect, and why the promises of the Old Testament may still be valid. The first point he makes in 9, 10, and 11 is that Israel's failure is due to spiritual pride and self-sufficiency, and specifically failure to read the Scriptures properly. In other words, Israel, if they had read the Bible properly, would have discovered that the promises of God are given to believers in Israel. They are not given to Israelites apart from faith. They are given to believers in Israel. And one only has to read the history of the Old Testament to see that. He starts out in the 9th chapter by saying, "It's in Isaac that thy seed is called." And then he says that it is Jacob whom I have loved, but Esau I have hated. So the line of the promise begins with Abraham, proceeds to Isaac, and to Jacob. Not every Israelite is going to experience the blessing of God. It is those who walk in the steps of the faith of their father Abraham who are the objects of the divine promise. Israel has misread the Bible. They have thought that those promises addressed to Israel included all the Israelites. And if a person was an Israelite, well, that meant, of course, that he was the recipient of the promises. No, the promises are given to Israelites. They're not given to Gentiles. those Abrahamic promises that he speaks of there. They are given to Israelites, but believing Israelites. So the apostle makes the point, you haven't read your own Bible correctly. The second point that he makes in the 11th chapter is that Israel's failure is not total. Even in Paul's day, there are Israelites who are being saved. And Paul says in that first 10 verses of chapter 11, I'm one of them. I'm an Israelite. I'm of the tribe of Benjamin. And God has not cast off his people because I'm saved. That's what he means when he says, has God cast away his people? God forbid. I also am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham of the tribe of Benjamin. God hasn't cast away his people, whom he foreknew. But of course, his people include the believing Israelites. Now in the section that we're going to look at, he says that Israel's rejection or failure is not final. There is coming a day in which all Israel shall be saved. Now we'll deal with that question, all Israel shall be saved, a little later.